And for more on this, we are very pleased to be joined by Artis Henderson, journalist and essayist whose work has appeared in the New York Times, Reader's Digest, and the online literary journal Common Ties. She's here now to discuss her newly released book, Un-Remarried Widow, in which she candidly shares her story as a young Army widow. Her memoir describes her life following the tragic death of her husband, Miles, who was killed in a helicopter crash in Iraq in 2006. Artis, thank you very much for a few minutes today.
Thank you for having me.
If you could, tell the viewers what happened on that fateful day in November of 2006.
So my husband was out on a night flight in northeastern Iraq. They were coming home from a night mission, and they ran into a sandstorm and lost visibility. And so their helicopter crashed and both pilots were killed.
You know, for so many people, this has been wars, not just in Afghanistan, but in Iraq, obviously, as well, where a lot of people don't have direct connections to it, very dissimilar to prior wars in this country. Explain the process of just even the basics of how you learn that you've lost your husband. How do they tell you, and in what manner?
So today, when a soldier is killed in combat, they send two uniformed soldiers to notify you. So I was notified soon after he was killed. I came home from work, and I had been living with my mother in Florida while Miles was deployed. So I came home from work and I came upstairs, and the door was already unlocked, which is pretty unusual. My mom and I always keep the door locked. And so I opened the door, and my mother was there, and there were two soldiers in the living room. And we don't live anywhere near a military base, and so when I saw them and saw that they were in dress uniform, I knew immediately why they were there.
And what did they tell you at that point? Because I'd imagine there's obviously the questions about the how, and then also about, in terms of starting the grieving process, the want to connect with a loved one that I understand you were denied in many ways.
Yes, it's very much a ritual that you have to go through. So one of them was a chaplain, and then the other soldier was not a chaplain. And the one who was not a chaplain said to me, on behalf of the President of the United States, we regret to inform you that your husband, Miles Henderson, has been killed in Iraq. And then I immediately wanted to know if they had any details, what had happened, if his helicopter had gone down, if someone else was killed. But at that point, it was still so early, they knew almost nothing. They had heard maybe weather, but they couldn't say for sure. And at that point, they didn't know the name of the second pilot, so they couldn't tell me.
Eventually, you were told that there was pilot error and that your husband was, quote unquote, unrecognizable. This both deprived the Purple Heart for your late husband, and also, I would imagine it denied you the chance for a final goodbye as well.
Yes, absolutely. A death in the military is complicated in many ways. It's difficult that they did not receive the Purple Heart because it was considered pilot error and the crash was considered their fault. So in a way, it's upsetting to think that he died in Iraq during wartime and won't be recognized for that. And in terms of him being unviewable, that is maybe one of the hardest parts of this, because I never got to see him after he came home. I never even saw his coffin. So in many ways, it's still unreal that he's gone.
You write so eloquently in the book about how different you and your husband were, but about obviously your connection. You were married for only 3 months when he deployed, and only 6 months when he lost his life. Obviously at that time you didn't have a chance to have children, and I'm curious, do you look at that with regret, Artis, or do you say, I would have had to raise this child all by myself here, it would have been unworkable? How do you look at the fact that you never got to have a family, you and your late husband?
That is something I think about every single day. When he died, I was 26, and we always used to say that we didn't want kids, which is so silly to think about now because I was 26 and he was 24, so who knows what they want at that age. But it didn't seem like such a loss that it does now. I'm 33 now, and I'm not sure if I will ever have children, and it's certain that I will never have children with him. And I think that will be one of the big regrets of my life.
You know, one of the things that really was a twist in this book in many ways was this was not the first tragedy that you've had to go through with the loss of a loved one, and it even bore the prior one some parallels to this. You lost your father in a plane accident of which you were a survivor at the age of 5. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's absolutely right. Life is amazing sometimes, and these parallels, it's almost unbelievable.
You do talk in the book about how in ways you and your mother reconnected, and because you shared in grieving processes that had some similarities, you were able to in many ways come together through this. And I'm curious, we've heard the military is a big family. Was it helpful for you that other military widows, did they help in the grieving process? I mean, no one death is the same. How does that work in terms of the military and taking care of their own after they lose somebody, obviously overseas?
I have to say that has been one of the greatest gifts to come out of this tragedy is my experience with the military. The Army has taken very good care of me, and the other military widows I've met have become some of my closest friends. I think that grief in general is a very lonely process, and it has been such a relief to know that other women were feeling, if maybe not exactly the same as I feel, at least with the same depth of loss.
Is it tough, Artis, to figure out what the future holds? Because I can just imagine for any other man out there who would be a part of your life, to be able to measure up to your late husband would be, to many, I think, impossible. And also, obviously, with that unfinished story, it must be really hard to move on. Have you figured out yet? I know that there's no such thing as closure, but have you figured out yet what you're ready for or what you want for your future yet?
In many ways, I have. I think professionally I've made that happen. I always wanted to be a writer, and now I'm a writer. I live in New York. I've traveled overseas. So all of that, yes. But maybe personally, and at least romantically, like you said, that's still very much a challenge.
Well, and I'm not the only person who's thought so, since reading it is one of the most revealing and honest books here on this very complicated subject. And again, it's called Un-Remarried Widow. Artis Henderson, I really appreciate the time here today, and thank you so much.
Thank you.